Hi, everyone. Welcome to the April edition of the Ops Engineering Showcase, AMER EMEA edition. We have what I call a very exciting POC that Aviel is going to be showing off today to the group. And so, Aviel, if you are ready, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi everyone. So this is the proof of concept for the upcoming CI catalog feature, which Fabio and I have collaborated on making. So if you're not already familiar with the feature, I don't know, maybe you are all familiar with the feature, but if you're not, it's basically going to be a way to easily share and use pre-built CI templates. So I'm going to first demo as much as GDK will let me, what that proof of concept, what the features look like locally, and then we'll take a brief look at the more interesting parts of the code. So here we have a private component that's already set up. So this component is in a private project, which automatically means it's a private component, which means that it will only be available to this component group. I'm talking and I haven't even shared my screen. I'm sorry. Yes, I did mean to share my screen.
I didn't want to cut you off because I wasn't sure if you're still preparing everything.
No, here we go. Yeah, let's see how one GDK works across 3 browsers with different users. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay, can I make Zoom? There we go. Okay. So now you can see this private component project here. So this has a very simple, this is the GitLab CI YAML in the project is basically the component. So if you import this component, you'll get a job that echoes that this is from a private component. And I've already set up a project that does import this component. You can see it here. And how we did that, which I'm going to take you through in more detail in a second, but I'm showing you first like what one looks like already set up. So here's your very rough library, and this is how you import the component. And because this project is inside the same namespace as the private component, it can access and use this component. So we already ran a pipeline, which I think actually completed successfully. And you see this job from a private component, which is being imported from our template. So when we go over to Safari now, we have a random user who's not part of that group, and their CI component library is empty because there are no public components and they're not part of the namespace of the private component we made. So what we're going to do is come back over to our component creator here, and we are going to make a new project that will have a public component that then our user in Safari will be able to import into their project. So first we make a standard project. And we'll make it public. It's going to be public component. And the description for the component is inherited from the project. So and it will create soon. Here we go. So the first thing that we're going to do is create the GitLab CI YAML for our component. So we have that. Now we're going to mark this project as a CI component project, and we're just going to mark it as published right away. In theory, if you were still like constructing this component, you would leave it unpublished and it won't show up in any catalog. So this marking it as a CI component project is as simple as setting a Boolean in the project CI/CD settings. Well, technically we're in the general settings page right now, but in the future it will be probably here or somewhere else. We'll find out. So now we've marked it as a component and we need to actually create a release for people to use it. So we make a tag and then we'll use that tag in the release, and then it will automatically show up in everyone who can access its CI component catalog. We'll call it 100. And then we'll make a release. From our tag, we'll call it the same thing. Great. So now if we come over to our user in Safari and reload our catalog, which right now the link to it is here, CI components library. What we should see, can't actually tell if the page is reloaded because of Zoom's controls. There we go. So hopefully we see a component, but we're not seeing a component. So I'm not actually sure what's going on. Let's make sure that this is a public project. Almost, but we made it inside a private group. I thought I had done it in the root namespace of that user. Can I move a project outside of a group or to another group? Does that exist?
Yeah, okay.
There should be a way, yeah.
Okay. Well, I
So
do this as in, oh yeah, go ahead.
With a public, if a project is public, right? Are we currently, would that be available to anybody? If a component is also public?
Yes, yes, it will be.
So
It will
regardless
be
in which namespace it goes, right?
Yes, regardless, so long as the namespace is also public.
Okay.
Okay, so now we are in our component maker namespace, and let me just make sure that the project is public. It's not. Now it is. Okay. So let's see if it shows up now. Yes, now we have it. Okay, so if we want to use this component, and we can see here's a description from the project. There's only one release, so we see 100, and we can copy this snippet to use the latest release. So we have the valid CI config, and the pipeline that created should hopefully have our job from the component. And here it is, and it passed. So that's the demo of the feature. Here's our echo. So I'm going to jump over now to the code to look at a few of the interesting bits. Before we do this, does anyone have questions about what we just saw? Cool. Okay, so there's, I think, 3 pieces of the code that I want to show you. The first one is how we mark the project as being a CI component. So that's where's our migration? That's where we add the CI component and CI component published Boolean fields to the CI/CD settings. So the idea behind at least what's going to be our like MVC of this whole thing is that we're reusing existing concepts to make this possible. So instead of creating a new CI components table, we're going to be using projects, like there's one CI component per project, and we're going to be reusing projects to handle our CI components functionality. So with that in mind, in this proof of concept, we have a CI component model, which in the final version we might not have. We might just use project directly. This is not a active record model. It just wraps project, so it gives us some functionality like here are all the CI components in a certain namespace, and it checks that they are published, checks the visibility level, and it gives us a few things that it pulls from project, like name and description and the releases. So that's the component itself. And I think the other interesting bit is this, the fetching of the component, which is a new possible definition in include. And in order to get the information from the template, we go directly through the project's releases and then get the commit and shot and get our template data. So that's essentially how it works. Yeah, any questions? I'm going to stop sharing.
I think there is a cross database join in the component model.
Yes, there definitely is, and we'll have to avoid all of those in the final version. We are hoping by not having a CI components table, at least initially, that will be easier, because we'll mostly be using things in projects and releases. Neither of those will be in the CI database.
One question I have that I think the group will find interesting is the one thing I like, Aviel and I have talked about this, is being able to leverage a lot of the existing structures or components has been great. But sometimes what comes along with that, using things, is that there's unanticipated challenges to kind of work around. And one of the questions that I think might be interesting to talk about is, have you uncovered yet, Aviel, anything that has been related to some challenges that that maybe you didn't anticipate, and how have you been able to overcome them?
So far in just doing the proof of concept, nothing comes to mind. It was actually quite smooth to be able to use releases and to be able to just add these new Boolean fields to the project settings and use those to filter our component one thing that I wonder will be, like, once we're implementing this for real, because we're reusing existing features, is it going to be hard to follow the component logic, or the CI component logic, because it's going to be mixed in with projects and mixed in with releases? It might not end up being a problem at all, but that's one concern I have.
Great, thank you. Sam, looks like you have the next question. Do you want to verbalize?
I do. I mean, this looks amazing to start off with. Obviously, the questions are always the new ones, but yeah, no, sorry. Is there a potential for circular dependencies on this? Like, if you were to have a template that includes a template that includes the previous one, like how do we handle that, or do we not currently?
We don't currently. So I think in the POC, you probably could set that up. We have, I know in other places, I think when defining things that like, is it downstream pipelines, we have circular dependency logic. So maybe we can use some similar concept to make sure we're not including things. I'm not sure if already, because we already potentially have that problem when we're using includes. So we might already have some logic that we can then reuse in this new form of includes to prevent that.
Yeah,
That's
we
something
do already have some logic there to prevent like including again what we have already done. But it will be possible, for example, to have you include a component, and that component could in turn include another component, and that will be totally fine. As you include a component, that component can, if it becomes too complex, not to be defined in a single YAML file, could be broken down in smaller local YAML file, and in that case, you can use include local in turn. But like that would be a completely transparent to the user like using the component. So it's a lot of the existing functionality and that we are using.
cool. Thank you.
Caleb, do you want to verbalize your question?
That's not really a question, but just that I have seen a lot of customers who are trying to do something like this, where they have a central group that runs their GitLab instance, and they want to have some kind of standardization around some kind of includes or other components that they can use in CI, and they're trying to make some way that works, but this is so much better. So I'm really excited about this.
That's great to hear. Fred, do you want to?
Yeah, I have the next one. But first of it, this looks amazing. This is great to see. And I really love seeing us reuse existing concept and really leveraging our way to like getting something out, because it could very easily have been a 5 months, 12 months project of making everything perfect. So I like that. And my question is, do we plan on having warnings or some kind of safeguard in the first version as to like downgrading a project from private, like to private from public? So like, because right now we have the project setting, and like, is this a CI component could be changed, and the releases and the tags, and then so we have like 5 options that all needs to be like centralized in a way that like changing any of these should trigger like a warning. I was wondering if that's like with the first release, if we're kind of like, well, for now it's going to be this, and it's fine.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of things that we will need to check. Like also when you're publishing it, do you even have a GitLab CI YAML in the repo? Right now, there's nothing that checks for that. So I don't know if we're going to have all the checks in the first version, but I do know there's ongoing discussion about like warning, for example, when you're unpublishing, and some of the other like cases that you mentioned. So I don't know what the full scope will be of the initial version, but it is a discussion in progress right now.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Because I imagine that when we'll be at the place where we will not be leveraging existing concept, and that is easier because you might have one source of truth, one place where the user like publish and unpublish their component. But right now, because it's like leveraging it all over, then yeah, it's definitely much trickier to make sure that all of these little checks are not changed inadvertently. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I wonder if there'll be an opportunity to use the event store, and like any place that could unpublish some part or like remove some part of a component can like send a component deleted or component removed event, and then we can respond to it in some handler.
Yeah, it's actually there is an issue in the same CI contribution framework Epic, where we talk about what should happen when somebody deletes like a component. Will it break all the users that are actually using that component automatically? I think it's the case with some existing features, existing competitors features, it is a problem. And we were thinking like, how could we prevent like a scenario like a left pad, happening with one of these components. So yeah, definitely we'll want to kind of think about that, and what will be even from a recommendation to users to say, do you want to use this component in your project? But what if the owner deletes it? Like one thing is like you're going to use GitLab managed components. They have like whatever certification or badge, whatever, and you can guarantee it's going to be stable. Another thing, you want to use like a community component, and but there is like things we thought like around that, where being a component, being also a project, you could import it or fork it or mirror it into your namespace, and you can use that instead. And then periodically you could upgrade like you would use with the with your package manager, so you upgrade whatever you have locally in your namespace, and you always reference what you have in your namespace. So if the upstream gets deleted, you're not affected because you have your local version, and could be like a safe way. But this is all kind of all thoughts we are having around that, but definitely it will be good to kind of start with this kind of best practices as we launch it, to avoid having kind of a bad user experience.
That's interesting. And just to conclude, because I know we're not discussing all of this, but like just throwing it out there, I was thinking perhaps there is something to do with permission when you say like this is now a CI component, that there's a difference where like you can no longer delete instantly, and then it would be like on a time frame, and then we can warn user and say, so this person has marked this project as deleted in like 2 months or whatever, and like that leaves people to like fork it or right, because it's public and it's forked, and we could like at least have that level of safeguard would probably be easier than all of these other little intricacies. You can delete it, but now because you've marked it as a CI component once, like it has to like decay. It needs time before it's completely removed, and that leaves people not like completely vulnerable. But yeah, thank you, Aviel and Fabio, for your answers.
Actually, this could be something, because we're going to focus primarily on internal catalogs. So you you get visibility into components that are published within your organization or top level namespace. This can become, it's very unlikely to happen because we assume that you don't have good communication within the organization if somebody deletes like a component. It could likely happen with public components. So, but before we launch like a public components, we can have some time there to address all these issues.
Fabio, you just answered my question. I was asking if you can use components outside your instance. It sounds like the plan, for the time being at least, is no on that. Do you know if there's plans to kind of maybe do that in future? Is that a huge issue, or?
Aviel, do you want to answer?
Yeah. So we're trying to figure that out right now, because one thing that we do want to allow is we plan to move all the GitLab CI templates over to being components. And so when we do that, we want to make sure that they're available to self-hosted users and to users on air-gapped instances. So we've been talking about how to make that possible. Like, are we going to bundle them with a release of GitLab so that they are available for those instances? At the moment, like we go through Gitly and pull the data from like other repositories on the same instance. So you couldn't import in the same way a component from outside your instance. And once we do have public components, you will at least be able to view, and then you can copy and make a component on your own instance. So that's something.
That's a good point. We can still do the old copy paste method that people are using in the minute, right? But yeah, thank you.
But we should be also able to import, because in the end it is a repository, and this is how we are simplifying this concept of components to just be a project and a repository. So you should be able to import a project into your local instance from GitLab.com, and you have your components there. You could create a group where with your components there and import them from GitLab. Even if we were thinking eventually in the future, we could even do that as you install or upgrade your GitLab, we could have like a rake task or something that imports automatically or upgrades your the instance level components, which are something where we might have within your instance of GitLab instance, we might have like a GitLab group, for example, with all these GitLab maintained components inside it. In the end, they're just pre-filled repositories, and then you can use them locally. The same thing, you could pick and choose some public components, import them in your local instance, and now you have local components there. So this is the way we are thinking how we could deliver to self-manage. But yeah, we might be able to kind of improve the UX around that. And
it's a kind of. But yeah, no, this is great. Thank you.
Looks like we've reached the end of our questions. Definitely thank you, Aviel, for going through this. As everyone has said, and as I've said, this is extremely exciting. Being a GitLab user for years, having this available to us soon is extremely exciting, and all of your hard work going towards this is it's exciting to see that transformation starting to happen as well. So for now, I think we're good. Thank you for everyone for attending. Look forward to chatting with all of you again sometime soon. But in the meantime, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thank you.